Welcome to the Catholic Forge, a conversational podcast where we gather to explore our Catholic faith and discuss how it forms our lives. All are welcome to join in this conversation and journey. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Eric in West Virginia.
Live in studios, this is John in Illinois.
And this is Ben in Kentucky.
Welcome to the Catholic Forge. For this episode, we're taking you out into the wild. Yes. We're considering the topic of hunting. Now quickly, let's go around the table and ascertain the experience of the gentleman here in this conversation. Ben, tell us of your hunting tales.
I had to kill a bird once that fell out of a tree and was injured.
Sorry. Poor
God rest its soul. And that's it.
It was the humane thing to do. Yeah, I've always been intrigued by it, but I've never been hunting. My dad wasn't a hunter, and I think that's usually how people get into it. You know, if your dad hunts, you hunt, but never been.
John?
Yeah, my dad was an avid hunter and never took us hunting. I always kind of admired his stories. He was as a young man, he did a lot of hunting, and in my young adult life, I decided I really wanted to investigate this, and so I've done quite a bit of hunting, bird hunting, deer hunting. Yeah. So most of the game that you find in northern Illinois, I have pursued at one point in time.
I remember a particularly wonderful story of you leaning out the window of your home with your BB gun, dispatching the squirrels directly into the crock pot, as I remember.
Yeah, we just set the crock pot right at the base of the tree and just shot them in. It was fantastic setup.
I never got to enjoy that. I always wanted to try the squirrel meat. It just never worked out. Anyway, I hunted in my younger years. I went with my dad and my grandpa while he was alive, my dad's dad, and my uncles and cousins. And maybe I went with them 3, 4, maybe 5 years in a row. And then I think once I got into middle school or high school, either it was the demands of school were too great or my interest turned toward other things, and then I didn't go. Although I remained, I think it
music.
I think it was the other G, games of the video type. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right. He was one of those.
That's right. I still am one of those. And so I haven't hunted, although I remained. I don't want to say a shooter, but I've remained a gun user and a marksman in my later years. But even then, not for a good while. So there's our experience. Take it as you will. But John, it sounds like you win the contest for most experienced hunter. So tell us about the first hunt deep in the dark bayous of Louisiana, or something like that.
Yeah. I remember my first deer hunt. I went out, we were muzzleloading hunting, which is a season here in Illinois. And it was the first time I went out, and I was going out, and the gentleman that took me hunting, a really good guy, he said, "You're going to walk out through this field." And he gave me these kind of cryptic directions, and it's pitch black. And he's like, "You're going to walk about a half a mile, and then you're going to turn right at a rock and a tree, and then you're going to find a tree stand, get in that tree stand." And so I walked out, and I had my gun in my hand, and
this is early morning.
The early morning. Yeah, the sun isn't up yet. Maybe really just a little hint of gray in the sky.
So did he send you by yourself?
He sent me by myself, yeah. And he was going to another stand further away, and I'm heading out, and I can remember even the look of the grass and the feel of everything, and there was a light dusting of snow, and it was this incredible experience. It was. I'm an avid hiker, and so I spent a lot of time out in nature, and it was a whole new entrance into nature. I've gone backpacking out into the wilderness for days at a time, and this was even a different experience because as I walked into the woods, I was participating in that nature in a whole new way that I had never experienced before. I wasn't just an observer now in life that was there. I actually was entering in and going to be becoming part of the cycle. And then it was just this unbelievable experience. You know, you've had that experience probably when you're driving along the road. You kind of don't really feel like you're in the place that you are. Have you had that experience?
I remember I was watching a documentary on Yellowstone, and this guy was talking about, I'm sorry to derail, but it's such an awesome story. He was talking about he delivered like mail to the people who lived way out in the park, like way back up near the mountains. And one day he was driving along on his snowmobile, and he stopped in the middle of this plain, and there were all these buffalo. So he stops the snowmobile and he turns it off, and it's right at dawn. And he's watching the steam pour off of these buffalo as like they're melting the snow that's on their backs, and they're breathing these clouds, like they're looking like they're vaping, the clouds of steam coming off of their nostrils. And he said for a moment, he felt like he had been in a place where no other person had ever been, that it was like the dawn of creation for him to be in this moment with these, you know, these beautiful, beautiful creatures. And so I don't know that experience myself, but at least I have that story in the back of my head of the mailman in Yellowstone Park. Keep going. It's so good. I'm loving this so much. Keep going.
But just how, you know, when you're driving through, you don't really feel like you're part of it. It's just kind of observers. And I would say that's how all my other experiences of in the woods had felt up to that moment. I all of a sudden had entered in on a new level. Just that being part of nature in a whole different realm. And then I eventually found my way to the stand and climbed up in it. And it was such an awesome experience. And not once was there a moment of machoism or I'm a man now. Or there was nothing like that at all. And of course, that would be someone that might detract or say what hunting's about. None of those emotions were there. It was a true serene experience where I was stepping into nature on a whole new plane. And that's really what that first hunting experience was for me. And I knew I was hooked.
All of this at the age of 7, right? Is that what you said?
No.
How old were you?
I wish I had started then, yes.
Yeah, how old were you?
You know, I was in my 20s.
Oh, okay.
At the time.
Well, now that makes more sense to me. My question of did he send you by yourself? I was picturing like an 8 or 9-year-old kid. Yeah, you were definitely capable of walking out by yourself in your 20s.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Never mind. No, I've heard.
However, it was very remote and dark, so it was still scary. Actually, there was no fear at all, but it was very remote and dark.
Now, I've heard people say that it sharpens your senses. That when you're out hunting versus just hiking, that it's like all of your senses are heightened. Your sight, sound. I don't know if that's true, but
I would say I feel that way. You know, I'm sure there actually isn't. You know, that might be more the response, the adrenaline response that's going on. But absolutely.
Kind of like what happens to me if I have to do public speaking. Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's an interesting thing too. As we began this topic, we mulled over whether we should really do a topic on hunting because there are a lot of misconceived notions about hunting, and as Christians, as Catholics, is this really a valid pursuit, an endeavor that we should be doing? And I think that would be a good place for us to start our conversation is you know, what is hunting? I mean, in terms of our the bigger picture, our morality. Mm-hmm. Who wants to jump in? Ben?
Yeah, well, I mean, being the one that's never hunted, I guess I'll jump in. But, you know, in a way, since I haven't done it, I guess I have a different perspective. No, it's always intrigued me because even though there have been times, I mean, I've come close to going hunting. I've got friends that hunt and a lot of extended family that hunt. And I thought, well, you know, I could go, you know, maybe next season I'll get my license and do whatever you have to do to get ready. And kind of like Eric, I'm not an avid marksman by any means, but as a kid, I always had a, you know, pellet rifle. And then, you know, I've always enjoyed shooting. And so, you know, I'm not foreign to guns or to, you know, holding or shooting a gun. So I was like, okay, well, a little bit of target practice, I'll be ready to go. But then the question would always come back to like, well, why? You know, once I get out there, am I going to really, how will I feel when I'm actually in the position to shoot, you know, whatever it may be? I usually thought about deer hunting. And then answering that question of, well, why do I want to do this? And would I actually go through with it once I was out there? That usually made me back out because I couldn't come up with good answers. But the older I get, the more I start to feel this kind of pull. Like it's an important part of human history. It's an important part of being human. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents to start in there.
Yeah, I think along that idea that I can definitely identify with that. We grow a lot of our own food at our house, and I and I do a lot of preserves. There's something about having a little bit of say in where your food comes from and having a little, I don't want to say control, because of course we as people ultimately never really truly have control, but having some self-reliance there was a very important part of it, hunting, and is an important part for me, that idea that I can provide in another level for our family.
I keep saying this, listening back to these episodes, I keep saying this, there's a sense there. I don't know why I say that. I think it's like I'm like kickstarting. I'm not 100% confident what I'm going to say next, and so I say this to give myself like a second and a half more longer to think.
You mean the phrase, there's a sense there?
There's a sense there. Yes, I know what I want to say. I have it right in front of me. But there's a sense there.
He doesn't know what he's going to say, and he's just filling for time here.
It's just like a real fancy
This is the Catholic Forge filibuster going on right now. Spit it out, man.
But there is a sense of stewardship, right? That we're all kind of hearkening to, or getting nearer to, this stewardship of creation. And that's where some of that disconnect might be, to forget or step away from the gift that God gave to all people in entrusting the earth to us, and especially animals. I'm going to bring it in. Here comes the catechism, whether you like it or not. Also, if you keep listening to this podcast, and thank you if you do, ccc.usccb.org will take you to a digital version of the catechism. But if you want to follow along, page 581.
Never give page number. You got to go paragraph numbers. Come on, don't start
2417. It's the Life in Christ section, 2417. Just to this point, God entrusted animals to the stewardship of those whom he created in his own image. Definitely Ben and John. Hence, it is legitimate to use animals for food and clothing. They may be domesticated to help man in his work and leisure. So, there it is. That with all of the natural realm, God has offered it to us, extended it to us as a gift. And here immediately we are confronted with the great sin of our global culture, that we have abused everything that God has given to us. All of these gifts, these good gifts. Oh, you gave us water, we'll pollute it. Oh, you gave us air, we will send smoke and flames into it and burn it.
Says
and make
the smoker.
Hey, watch it, okay?
You have given 1 cubic foot of air every minute.
Thanks a lot. Or you have given us this and that. You give us the buffalo. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we have so squandered this gift. And was it? It was just last week, I think, that Stephen Hawking, take it for what you want, but he said that mankind has another 1,000 years on the earth at our current rate of consumption, or something like that, which might not seem like a long time, but in the concourse of history, it's not a lot of time. Or that might seem like a long time, but in the concourse of how long we've been alive, that's not a lot of time, And so hunting also kind of falls into that confrontation of, what is the spirit of the hunt? What type of hunting are you doing? What are the reasons? What's the intention? And for the hunter, of course, how can we say, but as you are hunting, and Ben, I think you mentioned this, there's a sense there in your motivation, that you were asking those questions of yourself, like, what's this about for me?
Yeah, and I think that's why I never went, because I couldn't answer that question that you said, the intention and the spirit. It's like I never had a concrete enough motivation or intention to trust myself with doing it. But I knew it wasn't something to take lightly. And some of this was in my pre-Catholic, pre-Christian days too. So I didn't even have that idea of stewardship or any of this. But now that I do, and now that you're talking about this, that's what was missing for me in hunting is what is my goal here? What am I doing this for? Because John mentioned the macho aspect. I knew I wasn't about that. I knew I didn't want to just go out there and kill something so I could feel more manly,
Yeah.
But now, later in life and seeing things a little differently, I'm starting to see it's not necessarily about feeling more manly, but it might actually be tied into feeling more human in general. Yeah. And like you're talking about, the whole stewardship aspect.
There also may be a paternal thing there too, of providing for children. There may be a fatherly drive that's in there. I wouldn't stake my claim on that, but there seems to be some element for that for me. And one of the things talking about the stewardship is I have great admiration. I truly love nature. My undergraduate degree is in biology because I loved nature. I loved animals. I actually asked the neighbor one time if they minded me hunting near their property. And they're like, "Oh, well, we like deer." And I thought, oh my, they must think I hate deer. That's why I hunt them. It was such an odd thought for me because I have a great deal of respect and I admire deer and during non-hunting season I love seeing them. They're extraordinary animals. Yeah. So it's there's no lack of admiration or it's nothing out of a vengeance. I'm gonna get Bambi. That deer looked at me wrong. There's no getting even with nature here. So it really is a stewardship thing. And even right out of college, I worked for the conservation district in our area and really saw the need for ethical, good hunters in the area because the damage that deer did to the native population of plants and how they were actually decreasing biodiversity when their numbers weren't kept in check for the amount of land that had been set aside in those conservation districts. So there is even from a very secular standpoint, when I was working at the conservation district, they were very pro hunter because it was so many of the predators had been removed from our area. And so there was a need to keep that population for the sake of biodiversity of the plants, but also for the deer health, that if we let that population get too big, all of a sudden you have a lack of food and there are blights and diseases that start running rampant. So there really was there's a value there that stewardship is seen across the board, both on a spiritual nature, as we have God giving us animals and nature to care for and for use, and then we have also even just from a biological standpoint, there's a lovely stewardship that marries the two together.
Yeah. This points to the different types of hunting in the most general, where you have hunting as an expression of survival, okay, but hunting as a sport or trophy hunting, or I guess you could disambiguate further, right? So the difference is clear where the difference is John going into the dark to take down a deer to bring home to lay on the table, just like that, and then Cecilia, goes to it. Versus John
actually, we laid it on the dining room floor, not on the table.
And just let the kids jump into the cavity and sorry, that's gross. I'm sorry, that's gross. And then versus John going out and just slaying these deer and cutting the head off and tying it to his own head and wearing it as he rides back into town and leaving the body in the wilderness just to rot. Like you said, you were very careful to say that it wasn't a motivation of machismo. It wasn't so you could beat your chest. It was so that you not only could take part in the circle of life, but really give this provision to your family, which is certainly a very survivalist approach, which is I would say more common to our ancestral history than trophy hunting. And then I see here in the notes we also have compensation. I don't know who wrote that in there. What does this mean, compensation?
Oh,
I think that's part of the machismo thing. If a man is, just has insecurities.
I see.
Hey, am I manly? Am I tough?
I was thinking of like, oh, it must be like elephant tusks and the money you get for them, but it has to do with something
yeah.
else.
Oh, you know, in the pregame show, we had been talking about that, and on those types of hunting. For me, I am truly a food hunter. I'm never gonna hunt an animal that I'm not gonna eat. It really is about it, and a big portion of my family's diet is from game that we harvest.
Yeah.
And so that's actually become a big part of our diet. It's a part of our budget. It's it's a part of how we live. But on the discussion of people that would hunt for sport or trophy, it's definitely not my thing. I'm not in it for that, and I'm not in favor of that type of hunting, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that it's a absolute no. You know, that there isn't. We are stewards, and we have been given creation, and so if you're out hunting and you're out doing it for sport, as long as the animal's not being wasted. Even if your motivation is adrenaline or is some macho thing, if the animal's being used, there isn't a sin against the animal in taking the life of an animal, you know. But there might be if we have disrespect for the creator of that animal. So if we're out misusing creation and misusing his creatures, so the sin isn't really against the deer or the animal that you're hunting, but it would be against the creator if you're taking for granted the gifts that he has given. So there might be an area where some of those types of other motivations for hunting might be a little more sketchy, but that's an interior thing between you and God.
Well, and Eric, you had you mentioned the cutting the head off for the wall and leaving the body in the woods to rot. I'm not, in hunting circles, do people actually do that where they leave the body to rot?
In most states, that's against the law. Like in Illinois, that's called wanton waste, and you're not allowed to just kill an animal. Because
I find that, from I don't know where my barometer is, I would find that as a moral evil just from the fact that there are people starving in the world, and like you said, you've wasted this. Even if you don't want it, if all you're after are the antlers for your wall, that's fine. But I would hope that someone would donate that meat or, bring it to, do people do that? Like, hey, I don't want this meat.
Yes, there are.
Take it to the butcher or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually know of, I think Wisconsin has programs like that, but, you'll see signs up when you're up here driving around. Sometimes places that you can donate your deer or that you can donate the deer hide, and all of those things get used. So somebody might be out. I'm just out hunting for antlers, but they're going to still do something good with the rest of that deer. And so, like I said, I don't get that kind of hunting, but I'm not going to condemn somebody because they do. I would not be okay with them leaving killing an animal and leaving it in the woods. I feel that would be a real violation of our role as stewards.
The Catechism offers the flip-flop. Okay, so if you're still reading along at ccc.usccb.org, the next paragraph down, 2418, the first half of the paragraph especially, it is contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly. And then it goes on a little further to talk about spending money on animals and giving animals affection that it's due to humans. But especially that first line, that it is not just against the love of the creator, but it's against the dignity we share as people, our own dignity, to slay an animal needlessly, or certainly to make it suffer needlessly, torture or anything like that. I remember, I just thought of it as we were talking now. I remember when I was younger, maybe I was, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And my neighbor had this BB pistol. Oh man, I thought that was the coolest thing, that could exist. And we would go out into the woods and we were shooting at this bird's nest. And I think it was like one bird, and I don't think we ever even hit it because neither of us could shoot with a dime. But I came home and I think I borrowed his pistol to like target shoot with or whatever. And I was practicing with it. And my mom came out and she was like, hey, what's up? And I told her, I was like, oh, Mom, we were in the woods and we were shooting at this bird and all this stuff. And she said, well, why were you shooting at the bird? And I said, well, because we just wanted to hit it, I guess. Again, I barely had any concept that we could actually kill the animal, kill the bird. And she said, Eric, that bird, I mean, she was kind of sentimental about it, but fair enough. She said, that bird could be a mommy to other little birds, and now who's going to take care of the little birds and all this stuff? And of course, it was just like a harpoon to my heart. I was like, I don't know how the little birds would survive. I don't know.
What have I done?
What have I done? And to be sure, I think that we were such bad shots that the bird lived, and so fly away, little bird. Everything
whatever you
good.
need to tell yourself.
I don't know.
Yeah. Last time he told me the story, he cried. Different result.
It is what it is. But then I also think of another story when I was hunting one of the years when I was, and I remember we were coming up this canyon, not like the Grand Canyon, just a steep cliff out in eastern Oregon. Very dramatic place to hunt, very beautiful. And we were coming up out of this canyon up to this logging road, and we were going to walk the logging road back down to where our trucks were, wherever it was. And we were coming up, and we came upon this deer, this doe, and we were hunting bucks, whitetail, and this doe was injured, and she was all messed up, and I think I don't remember getting a real good look at it, so in my head I can't really like see the extent of the injuries. Like maybe she'd been hit, like by a truck, or maybe she was shot but ran away and they didn't catch up to her. Anyway, she was alive, and so my dad kind of took the rest of the group on up the road, and my grandpa stayed behind. And then we heard a shot ring out from his rifle, and he killed killed the deer. It was a mercy killing, and we didn't take the corpse or anything like that. But I remember my grandpa catching up to us, and his hands were shaking a little bit. And I was like, that's weird. And then later I asked my dad, I was like, hey, what was up with Grandpa? And he said, well, it kind of shook him up to have to kill this deer, And I was like, what? Like in my head, I was like, but aren't we out here to shoot deer? Like I couldn't connect it, but now I see clearly, like there's a difference between the intention of going and hunting, for that prize, for that meat, for that sustenance, versus seeing an animal really suffer. And obviously I think that John would agree, certainly, especially because I know that he chooses to use a bow and arrow in his hunting, which requires a considerable degree of skill, that excellence is required to really make a clean shot, so there's little to no suffering, on the case of the animal, as a respect, but also that's kind of, not that the killing is part of the fun, but that's also, part of the enjoyment is growing in skill, and all of that.
Right.
Can you speak to that, John? Your bow and arrowdom?
Yeah, absolutely. Bow and arrowdom, yes. Yes, in my bow and arrowdom. Absolutely. You said it all there. There are many opportunities that I've had where deer have been within a very acceptable range, but because of the angle of their body, I'm not certain that there would be a humane kill, and so I have to wait, and that in itself is hard. You don't always see deer, and you could set out and go hunting a number of times and not see deer, and then you see one, and boy, you wanna go. I just actually was out the other day, and it was a beautiful morning. It was about 15 minutes before legal shooting started, and a gigantic doe walked through, and it was a wonderful thing, though. I knew that she would be gone by the time it was, and so I just got to watch her and enjoy her, and in her presence there. I hope she'd come back, but she didn't. But but there's also an opportunity to grow in. I don't know. There's kind of a virtue there where we have to sacrifice. But also the point being is you're absolutely right. There is that need to be humane and to make sure that you're being responsible.
Yeah, I've always respected the skill of bow hunting, and I like the idea of the quiet of it. That when you take a shot, there's not this deafening, that's heard, just that disturbs the entire forest. It's like, while I've never been out there, and I've never actually even shot a compound bow, just a recurve, but just that nice quiet snap, and then whatever sound, the scuffling, I guess, as the animal runs off or whatever. But I love that idea, just like the disturbing as little as you have to of nature.
Absolutely. There definitely is a beauty to bow hunting in that you're it's much less intrusive to all of the woods, and you really are a part of it. I mean, when I've hunted turkey and deer, and there would be a group of animals, and there have been times where I've harvested one, and the other animals with it are kind of like, what just happened? They don't really know what happened.
Sure, yeah.
And sometimes they'll hang out and they'll stick around for 20 minutes, just kind of wandering around. So just that level of what you're talking about, where there is less trauma to nature itself, is really true.
And like, did he have that sticking out of him a minute ago? I don't remember that.
Sure. All of this, we're kind of circling around it. Food, yum. And in not having a lot to do with hunting necessarily, but we're talking about the different types of hunting, and John has certainly mentioned for his family, this is an essential part of their livelihood, their budget. And so he gets the opportunity to express to his children, this food came from a thing, not from a place or a store. And it is not delivered to you, like it did not appear magically in a refrigerator at Meijer or Kroger or Fred Meyer or Sam's or whatever it is. Not Sam's Club. I would never go there to get meat ever. Never. I would never go there. But you know what I mean. So that's a wonderful, I think maybe kind of a closing meditation. And I had this experience with Hannah at Thanksgiving where we were talking about Thanksgiving, and I said, we're going to have turkey. And Grandma and Grandpa are Nana and Gomps. That's what she calls them. That's what they are. They're going to come over and we're going to have turkey. And she's like, oh, all right. And I said, do you know what turkey is? And she said, no. And so I was like, well, here, pull YouTube up and we'll look at some turkeys. And they said, what does it sound as a turkey make? Gobble, gobble. On and on you go. We're just playing. And then the day came, I guess on the Sunday before, it was Saturday or Sunday before I got the turkey and get it defrosting, and then I put it in a brine, and it was unbelievable. If you want the recipe, thecatholicforage@gmail.com. And it was unbelievable. But on Wednesday, I put it in the brine to cook it on Thursday. And so when I finally got it into the sink and it was fully defrosted, beautiful, I said, Hannah, come in here. And she came in, and I got it in the sink, and I took the plastic off and was washing it off and getting all the stuff out of the cavity. And I held it up, and I said, what's this? And she said, I don't know. That's what she says. I don't know. And I said, this is a turkey, honey. And I said, do you remember the turkeys that we saw on the video? And she said, yeah. I said, this is the turkey. And she's looking at it. She's looking at me like, gobble, gobble. What? Like, the connection wasn't quite there. But I was trying to say, like, this was an entity once, a creature. And then now it's been killed, and now we're going to put it in this unbelievable brine, and we're going to make it beautiful, and we're going to eat it tomorrow on our sandwiches with an equal ratio of mayonnaise to turkey, as all Americans do. John, now.
Absolutely. Maybe some hot giardiniera in there, too.
You make your own mayonnaise, don't you? Or did you used to?
We have. Yeah, we have.
My man. Now,
from our own chicken eggs.
Oh, shoot. Here we go. And so it was kind of fun and then she just became a fanatic about it. She was like, Mommy, the turkey's in the brine in the fridge. And then we started, Mommy, the turkey's in the oven with the carrots and so on and so forth. But it was kind of a fun little experiment to get to not an experiment, but, to get to tell her about that. I think she's still too young to put the two together. But this is an opportunity, I think, to talk about that and how important that is during our time, that the meat and frankly, all the food that we bring into our homes from the store comes from the earth in one form or another,
Right.
Harvested, gathered, again, God's gift to us, and how we treat this food, how we think about this food, is really an important, I think, a part of our Christian call, and is really a form of worship to the Creator, that we honor Him and reverence Him in these good gifts. Is there any experience there? Like, have you guys had to explain chicken to your children? I don't know.
Yeah, we actually eat. You guys don't even know this. We eat a nearly vegetarian diet at home. It started out.
There was something wrong with him.
He looks so pale all the time. What's wrong?
Now I'm gonna have to put an updated photo on the website so people know that's not true. No, it started for budget reasons. Meat got really expensive when we were trying to, save some money, and so we just started eating it less. And then I won't go into the details. it's not for any kind of fanatical animal rights reasons or anything like that. But we learned that you can live on a dinner that doesn't have meat, that it's can actually be filling, and that I never thought I would say that sentence, but so Evie is my 4-year-old. She's grown up in a house where a lot of our meals don't have meat, but when company comes or when we go to a restaurant or whatever, she loves. I love bacon is like a motto of hers. She'll repeat it. I love bacon. Yep. But when we started she'll stop me from smushing an ant. If I'm about to smash an ant that's in the kitchen, no, Daddy, don't hurt it. But then I explained I'm trying to connect those dots, and not to make her feel like it's wrong to eat bacon, but just so she does know, well, this came from an animal. It had to be killed. And she said, "Did it cry?" and I was like, well, no, I don't think pigs cry.
Oh, no.
I didn't tell her, maybe squeal, but no, they don't cry.
Don't read Charlotte's Web to her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But that disconnect, out of sight, out of mind, she's still okay. I think she gets that, okay, a pig had to die for me to eat this bacon, but she truly doesn't seem bothered by it. But that ant, because it's in front of her and she can see it, it's like, no, don't smash the ant. And I think that's where I've had discussions with people. They're against hunting, and I don't even hunt, but I still defend it. And it's like, oh, that's barbaric. But they eat meat 3 meals a day, and I'm like, look, all those animals that you're eating, someone had to kill them for you. Someone had to, whether it was a farmer or a large-scale factory operation. And in all honesty, what might go on in those places is more barbaric than what happens out in the woods with a humane hunter, So I think it's just a nice to tie it back into stewardship and into biblical times and all human history to accept death as a part of the food chain, to know that something did die, to accept. I always think about sacrifice in the biblical stories, how much of it's lost on the modern mind when they're talking about sacrificing animals. We don't truly get that, like the people who the stories were written, in that time got it, because I've never had an animal's blood on my hands. How can I get that the way they did? So I think it's healthy. It's healthy to think about that, the death behind it, and hunting kind of brings that into play.
With our kids, we started bringing home deer and geese and turkey, and they all got very involved in the process of helping prepare that meal. And it's a very natural thing for our kids, but there's always a great deal of reverence and respect there that we have for what we're doing. Mm-hmm. To finish up my story where we started.
Oh, yes, the story.
I finally got into that tree stand, and I sat there, and it was a brisk morning. As I said, there was some snow on the ground. And I sat there, and the squirrels were bopping around and everything. And I thought, it's getting close time to me to get down. There's nothing going to happen. And then I heard this swishing of leaves. And I thought, that sounds like a person walking. And I looked down, and there was a big ravine to my right. And I looked down this ravine, and there is this majestic buck down there. And I thought, this is it. Am I going to do it? And so I brought the muzzle loader up, and I pointed it at it. And my heart was racing so fast, I actually had to stop looking through the sights at the deer because it was just too intense. And I had to just watch it for a few minutes, walk. And it eventually got to a point where it was right in front of me. And I thought, now is when I need to make the decision. And so I said, that's it. I pulled the trigger. A large cloud of smoke came out, as you would imagine, from a muzzleloader. Mm-hmm. And there I'm trying to look through the cloud. And I look, and there, just a few steps from where I had left it, it had fallen down there, and the deer was there. And it's an odd thing. I had been worried that I would feel bad about having taken a life, and instead this big song of praise welled up in my heart, and I actually found myself saying, thank you, Jesus, and that might almost sound perverse to somebody that hasn't hunted, but I instantly had this recognition of the whole process of knowing that it was a gift from God, that this food that we would now have, this thing that we would now have was a gift that had been entrusted to me. And so there was this, I know that sounds like an odd experience, but it truly was what happened. I was praising God as I went down. And then when I went and harvested the animal and we dragged it out, there was just this awe, this sense of awe that God had given me this, and we took it home and we used every part of that deer that we could, and it really was a beautiful experience. And just for me, so much of the hunting is being in nature and being still with God, and being still in His creation.
Awesome. That's such a great story. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. This has been the Catholic Forge. We thank you for listening, and we'd like to close, as always, with a prayer and a blessing. May God the Father,
God the Son,
and God the Holy Spirit bless you, guard you, and lead you to eternal life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening to the Catholic Forge. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will leave us a positive rating on iTunes. You can also review on iTunes, and that would be awesome. Thank you very much. SoundCloud or YouTube. Please continue the conversation with us on Facebook by searching for the Catholic Forge. Hit us up on Twitter at the Catholic Forge. And if you'd like to submit questions for our mailbag segment, or you want to get in touch with us in general, you can reach us at thecatholicforge@gmail.com. Don't forget our website, www.thecatholicforge.com. Excuse me. Definitely, most certainly, as always, we give a special thanks to our wondrous wives for their continued support of this project, and we also thank you very, very much for listening.